All right, what's up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode Health and Fitness podcast, joined by my good friend, personal health and fitness coach and mentor and business partner, Jim Brown. Jim, what's up, brother?
Another week, man. Another week down. What's up with you?
Now, I'm excited for this, man. It's been like
Yeah,
3 weeks, I think, since we've been
it
able to
has.
jam, dude. I was out of town, you were out of town, and
Yeah.
so it's been a minute.
Yeah. We got some catching up to do. That's for sure.
Yeah. How's life, man? Life been good?
Yeah. Just real busy, as always, like you are. This last week I started to run my program, Monster Maker, again. And that first cycle, man, that first week is a wake up call. It's pretty brutal, but we're getting into week 2, so we'll see how I settle in. But normally by the end of week 2, I'm pretty acclimated. And then week 3, I start really beating the logbook and start feeling really good. But that first week, man, is brutal. Just mentally and physically exhausted after the workouts.
Yeah. Well, you, I'm guessing, obviously you designed this workout program, so you already knew leading into it, like, where your nutrition needs to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right away. I've been, first night, just automatically, I'm waking up at 3:00. I'm starving, so yeah, I had to up the calories a little bit, definitely up the carbs, and I'm losing a little bit of fat just because now it's harder to eat that much, and keep up with the workout. But yeah, man, it's just as a self check, that's a no joke workout,
Yeah. That was the first thing for me was, dude, realizing that I was way under on calories to sustain that intensity, dude, which I know we've talked about on this podcast,
Yeah.
but it was, I'm just not used to that. Right. I'm used to, I was used to like 40-minute, one body part, 40-minute workouts. And then all of a sudden I'm training for 2 hours, and it was like, had to go from 100 carbs to pretty much 300 plus carbs a day overnight just to sustain the energy to be able to push that intense of a workout.
Yeah, it's amazing too, because as lean as you are, you really can tell, right? It's like you don't have a lot of, well, no pun intended, you don't have a lot of padding there to rely on stored body fat and stored energy. Like when you're out, you feel it, you feel it, and it hurts, and you need to fucking eat, and it's you kind of realize how powerful that is. Like I had, my buddy just went, he's like 45, total stud, works out, does all this stuff, and went and got his testosterone checked. And he just went through a whole thing where he was, got his wife pregnant. So they had to do some stuff to, supposedly get his sperm mobile and mobile or motile, whatever, ready to go. And anyway, his low testosterone. So he started on, he calls me after week 2 or week 1. He's like, "Hey man, I'm fucking starving. Is that normal?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude," because he's a super lean guy. It's like, so when you're lean, you don't really have that padding, there's really no room for error. When you're hungry, your body you got to eat for sure.
Yeah. And then now that I'm, done with the cut cycle, and I'm still maintaining, like, my body fat is,
Yeah.
I'm probably still dropping body because I still, I think I just finally figured out maintenance mode, meaning that, okay, over the last 7 days, like, I've been consistent, same weigh-in every single day, every single time. So that for me is 2,950 calories. And I just keep upping at 50, per week, just slow. Cause I don't want to, like, it's stupid, but I'm just, I don't want to, I want to stay lean. I want to find that magical equation.
No, you want to be right there.
Yeah, just enough to give myself the excess to build the extra muscle, but not enough where, and I'm okay if, like, let's just say over the winter, if I add on, let's just say 2% of body fat that I got to cut off for the next summer. Okay, I'm cool with that. But like, I'm going to make sure I can always see my 6-pack,
right.
But yeah, right. But dude, like, I'm having to force feed myself to be at maintenance, just as sure. Because dude, I was pretty much carnivore, right? I mean, I was always taking like 100 grams of carbs a day, but like, I was just under eating for so long.
Yeah.
So when you go from 1,500 calories a day for years to freaking 3,000, dude. And being a smaller guy, you know, I'm 5'10", 166 pounds, you know, right? Like, you know, so
Well, it's
that's a tough
amazing.
one.
It's always amazing, right? So like you're lean, you're staying lean, you're right around maintenance, you know, plus or minus a very small margin. Actually, when you're putting in what I would consider, you know, a very demanding workout, to what I think needs to be done to really change, you know, what your body looks like and your strength and all that. It's how much freaking food you got to eat. And, you know, 3,000 calories of clean food, meaning, you know, the food that you should fucking be eating, is tough, man. It's not like a medium pizza and you're knocking out 25, 100 calories. It's a lot. When you're eating the food that you should be eating, that's a lot of food.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of food, man. I mean, even for me, 3,000 calories I'm eating, you know, I'm at the point where by the end of the day, I'm like, ugh, you know, and then anything beyond that, 3,500, it becomes a job. People don't
Yep.
realize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I tell people, I'm like, look, yeah. I mean, it's so easy when you're eating, you know, processed,
Yeah.
you know, just non-satiating meals versus, dude, like, try to get, you know, try to like get stuffed off of, like, I don't know if, I mean, obviously people can do it, but it's like you eat 500 calories worth of chicken and rice, like, dude, you are freaking stuffed to the gills. You know,
Yep.
where like you go eat 500 calories at McDonald's, you're still starving. You know,
That's
but
like
yeah,
3 McNuggets,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But all
It's
my
not a
meals,
lot.
to your point, you know, whole foods. So we're talking, you know, it's
Yeah.
like my post-workout meal, dude. 360 grams of a sweet potato and 8 whole eggs.
Yeah.
Like, to get that down, dude, that is a ton of, like,
8 eggs
I'm
is a
just,
lot.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
I'm freaking bloated. I'm extended for like hours, dude. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, dude. So no, I'm excited for you, man. So how long has it been since you were last on Monster Maker?
It's been a good 4 or 5 months, I think.
Damn. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, had a my shoulder thing cleared up. I finally got my shoulder really healthy again, and they're both in a really good place. So I'm going to take advantage of it, and see what I can do. But yeah, it was weird. I had some shoulder weirdness that lasted quite a bit, man. It was probably 6 7 months that lasted, and finally rehabbed out of that. So I'm doing pretty good right now.
Yep.
So we'll take advantage of it. You know.
Yep. So then I recently just went through my first deload week. You know, now I mean, when I say it, like, I've had, you know, weeks and months off where I just wasn't being consistent, but now that I've been more consistent, more strict, and more determined than I've ever been in my life with this, dude, it was the first time that this deload week totally effed with my mind. You know,
Yep. Yeah, I get it. Well, it's hard too when you get in that disciplined zone where you're doing, you're super regimented. You're super regimented. It's hard. It's hard to break that cycle, man. But have you done a workout or a couple of workouts since you've been back?
yeah, I've finished
Yeah.
finished my first full week on. So I'm a week of yeah. So I've been a full week, and now I'm 2 weeks into, because I take every Tuesday off is how it works out. So then I train 6 days and then take Tuesday off as the
Yeah.
seventh. So,
How was it coming back?
you
Were you
know, the first,
stronger?
not the first 3 workouts I wasn't.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I even lost a little bit of strength, but then the last three, then I think it was just my body. Because not only did I deload, I also was on a vacation, or not a vacation, but a working,
Yeah.
I was traveling that week. I still made sure I hit my macros, whatever. But I think, but dude, I was so busy, and I don't go out, I don't party. Like, it was just between travel and events that I had to
Yeah.
be at for work. According to my sleep tracker, I only averaged 3.5 hours a night of sleep, for that 5
It
days I
takes
was
a
on the
toll.
road. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that was a combination of that, which, was not good. And it wasn't that, just like, I wasn't exhausted myself where I could only sleep 3.5 hours a night. It was, hotel. I
Yeah.
just couldn't sleep in the hotel that good. It was just,
Yeah.
there's other things that are with that. So I think that maybe had something to do with it. But then the second kind of part of the week, because I train, I end up doing each body part twice a week, right? So then from there, it just skyrocketed up, dude. So now intensity, now starting this week, dude, like, yeah, progressing great, intensity's great, feeling great, zero fatigue. It's feeling amazing.
Good. Yeah, it's I think the more intense the workout is, it's you need a couple workouts to get back into it, and then I would expect after a couple workouts that you would be stronger than you were when you left off. But if you're doing just like a normal split, back, bicep, whatever, push pull, you take some time off that first workout, you're strong immediately. But with a workout like we're doing, where there's so much, it's so demanding, I think you have to get back into it. It's really interesting that way. But yeah, it's not a gentle program.
Yeah, dude. So, I saw one of your tweets recently where you said, okay, the biggest, most muscular dudes that you ever met in your life either train every body part every day or every
Yeah,
other day, which is just, I mean, that is the opposite of what most of us that grew up kind of in the bro world were conditioned
yeah,
experience with. You train chest Monday, you train back Tuesday, um,
yeah,
but it just seemed, and now that I've been doing, I mean, working with you and like, I never would have thought, like, I would have always assumed that I'm way overtraining now, but I know I'm not, because I'm not suffering from crazy, delayed onset muscle soreness. Like, I'm
yeah,
really barely even that sore. Like, I might
yeah,
be sore for a 24-hour period, but then it's recovered. I feel great. So can you kind
yeah,
of break that down? Because that was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my mind around, just because, man, growing up, Flex magazine, muscular development, following Flex Wheeler, it's like they all just did this bro split in this way
yeah.
that so many of us were conditioned to follow.
Well, me too. And I got to the point where I was really kind of stuck. I wasn't really into what I called, when I got really freaky strong and at the biggest that I was. And that's benching 500s, and that's doing military presses with 3 plates for 15s. That I'm talking when walking around with every machine, as many hammer strength machine as every plate that you could load on the thing with people holding it on. That kind of freaky. I was training at that point. I'm probably 12, 13, 14 years in. Been competing, all that, and it just was kind of tapped out. And I started talking to Dante, and we were on a private board, and he's starting his DC workouts and really putting size on guys. And then one of my mentors, the guy that I got a lot of information for over the years, was Phil Hernan, and he was one of the biggest, thickest pro bodybuilders ever. Man, that guy looked like the fucking Hulk, and he worked out every body part every day, every whole body every day. And those two guys really had a big influence on me. And so I tried DC, and it was a little, I didn't exactly like the way the split worked. I tried whole body every day, and it just fucking killed me. It was way too much. I could never get used to it. And so that's when I came up with, doing like half a body each day and then splitting that up into twice a week. And that's when I really, I tried it, and kind of messed with, I had to get the volume right because I kept doing way too much. And man, when I started to tune it in, that's when I got really crazy. I just started growing again. And that, the same routine that you're using, the Monster Maker program that I have, that's the same thing that I was doing legitimately for, the last, from that day on till when I was really ended, that run of meat. Well, I even did it after that. I did it till, I was in my early 40s, and continued to do that program. And, it was great. But to get there, it took a lot of convincing, man. And if I wasn't stalled out the way I was, I don't think I ever would have tried it, because I thought it was crazy. I thought it was crazy to, work, go in and do one set of squats and then do that every day. That sounded stupid. But man, these guys were getting great results with it. And I remember there was a guy that just worked construction in my little hometown. Dude was one of the thickest dudes that I'd ever seen, and worked his whole body every day. It took him about an hour. He'd pick one exercise for each body part and do a couple sets, and that was it. Heavy, but not a lot of volume at all. And I just never understood it until I tried it. So, it was kind of out of necessity. I needed to do something else to get myself, growing again. And that was it. Most of the guys who tried DC and really were religious about it, or tried, like the big Beyond Belief, or Phil Hernan's specific type of routine, or my monster stuff, anything like that, have always gotten big, have always put on muscle. And now there's a guy called Jordan Peters, a guy in the UK. He's probably the biggest, thickest, sickest looking individual that I think there is. And, he took DC, he took Dorian Yates, he took all of that and developed his own stuff. And you can follow him on Instagram, but that guy is just subhuman, man. He is so strong and so big. And, he's doing stuff twice a week. He's doing body parts twice a week, if not every other day. But guy's just incredible. So I really think, guys can put on muscle a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of ways to do it, and you can have success doing a lot. But the biggest, thickest, most powerful looking dudes are doing more frequency, a higher, less volume and more frequency than normal people.
Yep. Yeah. And I know you're not a big fan of all these, what do they call them, muscle scientists out there, in the field. And I can totally understand why, because research doesn't always, studies in the lab doesn't always translate into what actually gets results, but there's some of them that I'll follow from time to time. And, this is a big thing that seems to be, at least in that scientific community, that's been discovered. I don't know how, I've only been following some of these guys for about a year, but that they're, really pushing too is, the explanation is like, look, if you train it and then maybe it only takes 2 days to recover, and then you have 4 days or 4 or 5 days where it's fully recovered before you train again, that muscle's, going into more of a catastrophic mode. So you're just, it makes sense, right? Like, like you always say, dude, like, train it. As soon as it's done being sore, train it again.
Well, and it takes a while, right? It takes a while before you start losing strength and size in a muscle, but I think the real point is, you just, there's a cycle that has to happen for you to adapt, right? You have to have a stimulus, then you got to recover from that stimulus. And doing, the stimulus so great that it takes 10 days to recover isn't better than doing that little cycle 3 times. Doing that little cycle just enough to stimulate adaptation and then recovering, and then doing it 2 more times while the guy only does it 1 time in 10 days, that always wins. And so it's hard to get over, especially if you came up like you and I did, with the routines and the muscle bags and all that stuff. But, if you go practical based knowledge with guys who are actually doing it and have done it, that's normally, and genetic freaks aside, right? There's always going to be people like Vince Taylor who does, curls with the 25s and has, some of the best arms in the world. But the biggest, most powerful guys are always lift like that. You just do.
Yeah, I'll tell you, dude, like, okay, like my 2 weakest body parts have always been like my side and rear delts, and then my calves. But I never trained them with this kind of frequency. So now that, like, just on side delts, not total delts, but just side delts, I'm doing over 20 working sets a week now. And it's the first time I've seen growth. Like, I go, and we're talking only like less than a 75-day period.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been under 3 months that I've started this routine that you put me on. But the first time in my life, dude, I look in the mirror and it's like, dude, I got fucking cap delts now. When I hit a side chest now, it's like, now I got that rear delt popping. I've never been able to see that, right? And then, dude, like, I put on over a 1/2 inch on my calves in the last 90 days, and I've never been able to get my calves grow. Like, my quads and hams have always grown good, but my calves, but now, dude, I'm doing calves every day, 6 days a week. Now I'm only doing, 4 working sets per day.
Yeah.
But they never, maybe I should up that because they're never getting sore. I've even thought about both of those, like, hey, maybe I need to build those to 40 sets a week. Because, like, it seems like the more consistent, the more I add, but like with those, but same thing with those body parts, like, I can't get them sore.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that happens too. That's real interesting. Right. And so that's why the only change that between like the program that you and I are using now and the one that I was using when I was at my biggest and craziest was there was more volume because the adaptation that comes along with it, like, so I could handle more volume, I could handle more stimulus. And of course, I was on more anabolics. I was eating a lot more food. I was using, more advanced recovery techniques. And so I had to put more volume at it. So it was even more. And, that's at the point, there was one point there for quite a while. I couldn't get sore. I could go in and I could do 3 hours of chest and I wasn't going to be sore. I might be tight that night, but by the time tomorrow, 24 hours rolled by, I could train it again. And so, there's some of that you're probably experiencing, you're kind of adapting a little bit to it. And, I would probably throw a little bit more weight, but keep the volume down rather than going for the volume. But, you could kind of attack it from either way.
Yeah. The only thing I mean, there's certain movements like a side lateral raise
Yeah.
where in the past where you get too heavy, it's like, then like, to me, it's just kind of
Yeah.
too risky. Cause cause I'm just like, yeah, I want to get at as much muscle as I can, but I also think about, hey, what are the hobbies I want to be able to do when I'm 70 and 80? Right. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
also
and one
really
of the,
cognizant of joint,
yeah, one of the things with those, if you're using like dumbbells at home and stuff, that's when, even as strong as I was, I had those clip on the magnet weights where they're half and 1 pound. Because when you go, if you're doing like a side lateral or whatever with a 25 and then you go up to a 30, or if you're at a 30 and you go up to a 35 or whatever, sometimes it's a big fucking jump. And then it takes you out of the feel, right? Then you're using the 35 and you lost the feel of it. But if you use a 1 pound click on, magnetic weight to stick on, then you just threw some weight at it, but you can still, it's small enough that you can actually feel it and use it to progress, right? Like if you're on a hammer strength press or whatever, you don't have to throw on another 45, you can throw on a 10. And so it's much harder when you're doing, like isolation movements like that and you're using a dumbbell. Because most dumbbells, I think even, after the 20s, there's a 27, there's a 25 and a 27.5 in some gyms. But after that, it's usually 5 pound increments, and that's a lot.
Yeah. And for me, mine are all 10-pound jumps.
Yeah. So there you go.
So in what I've done, like with like a side ladder raise, an example, and I don't know, maybe this is limiting growth, but just fucking training slow, like meaning like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll come up, all the way up with it, but then like when you hold that mofo up at the top
Yeah.
for 2-3 seconds, and then you just fight with everything they have to weigh on the way down, like I can make 10-pound dumbbells feel as heavy as 30-pound dumbbells on a side lateral raise.
Oh yeah. 100%.
So, with certain injuries where it's like, okay, like that are easier to get injured on, or with certain movements that are easy, I try to figure out ways to make the lighter weight harder so that I don't get the joint,
Yeah, when some days on legs, if I go in, I start on the pendulum squat. If my back isn't feeling great, or if like it's a day that I really want to put on some weight, dude, I'll just do 1.25 squats, and then I can cut the weight in half. And I'm just as sore, and it's just as hard. And it takes away. So that's the good thing when when you're more mature as a lifter too, and you take the ego out of it, and then you're working out at home. So you're not trying to impress anybody or something, have a rep or something. But when you start really experimenting and dissecting the movement like that, you can make lightweights really hard, or you can change the angle a little bit. You can change how you hold the dumbbell. You can change the timing of it and the tempo and make it a whole new exercise.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I learned that the first time I worked out with you, dude. Like, we did shoulders that day.
That's right.
I don't think we went over a 30-pound dumbbell that whole entire workout. But like on the way home, dude, like I had to like use my hand to get my hand up to the steering wheel. My shoulders were so roasted. But that was the first time I ever trained like that.
Yeah.
And it's such an eye-opener for me.
Well, and then, I cheated too. So I was watching, I think I had you do some, how do you normally do it? And then I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. Let's try this. And played that. But that's just to that point, there's so many different ways. Like I started changing the way that my palms are facing, and it really helped my shoulder feel better. And then rehab. And then with that, I was able to add more weight than ever before without having my shoulder feel compromised. So just even now, I've been doing this shit for 40 years. And even now I'll see something on Instagram or somebody do something or somebody in the gym. And I'm like, that looks stupid. All right, I'll try it. And then, oh, okay, there's something here, man. When my palm is faced this way or when my elbow's up that way, it's different. And then I'll experiment with it, play it and see, kind of evaluate it.
Yep. 1,000%, dude. Yeah. And then I started doing, heavier upright rows, like you had showed me. And yeah, dude, like
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I never really did a lot of upright rows. I just, always thought they were just for traps. And I was like, I'll just do shrugs,
Yeah.
I've never done them for side delts, but I understand why you do it now, cause holy
Yeah.
shit,
So
do them right.
yeah, that with the kettlebell, or you can use the dumbbell and you kind of do real explosive. And then I've been supersetting. I'll go over with the barbell and do those just real, with the bar, just raises kind of like that. And dude, yeah, it's been crazy. But I always got in trouble when I did upright rows with a fixed bar and my hands were kind of in the same place and I wasn't allowed to, kind of go where my body wanted to go and into like a neutral movement plane. And that doing it with the dumbbells or the kettlebell really solves that. And I was able to, I'm able to use more weight than I have in a long time. My shoulders feel great, but yeah, that's a whole nother little treat, right?
Yeah.
Something new. Yeah.
Well, and I find that stuff's fun, dude. It's kind of like all things. Like when you add a little bit of novelty to it, it just
Yeah.
gains that new excitement. So
Yeah.
even if it's just like one new movement every 3 months, it's just
Yeah.
just changes things up enough to get you excited again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool when you find a new movement or you experiment and do something new and then you're like, oh shit. Or I would, one of the things I did a lot too is I would get to the point where I was kind of stagnant and then I would just change all the exercises that I was doing. Like, make sure I'd pick out 3 new machines for chest. And it was like, okay, I'm doing those. Or I'd reverse the way I was doing it. Like I'll start with flies first. And, when you start over or when you start at a new machine, for me especially, I would go over and I'm like, holy shit, I am weak as fuck. I'm doing one plate or whatever. And then, 3 months go by and I got 3 or 4 plates on it, or I work my way up to the stack. And that does a lot for you mentally. It kind of keeps it fresh. And then you get to start over and see progress again,
Now going back to soreness. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that from past conversations that soreness is kind of like the least most important proxy that people should pay attention to. I mean, not that it doesn't matter and that doesn't play a part, but I think, and again, correct me, I could be wrong on this, but from my understanding is that people almost overemphasize that and make that more of a proxy than it should be for effectiveness.
Yeah, I think, I like soreness for a couple of things. One, I like it to evaluate to evaluate a movement, right? Like when you're starting out and you're trying to find out which movements really work the intended muscle group, like, hey, does this bench press or, does this hammer press work my whole entire chest? And that'll be like a testing where we've done that before. Like you go and I'll have you do like 30 sets, or whatever, just something crazy, a bunch of volume at it. And then that's it. And so you can evaluate where you're sore, right? So, hey, that machine made, my mid and lower pec sore, but it didn't do anything. I don't feel anything in my upper pec or, anterior delt, whatever. So then you kind of build the database. So soreness is really good to do that, to really evaluate what movements are hitting what, if you don't really know, or if you're unfamiliar, or if you're trying to experiment with a new movement or trying to really focus on a body part, that's a great tool. But then when you're doing a split, a more advanced one where you're trying just to stimulate and then recover and then repeat it as many times as possible in a year, then the soreness isn't as important. It should be like, you're sore a little bit afterwards, maybe 24 hours after, but then 2 days from now, you're ready to train again. And I think that's, for what we're doing specifically now, I think that's about where you need to be. And any more sore than that, where you're having to take extra days off, then that would be at the point where I'd tell you to back off volume, And I don't think you need to hit, these extreme levels of soreness for growth. You certainly don't. You just have to go enough to stimulate adaptation. And that's typically, where you're barely sore, and able to train definitely in 48 hours.
Yeah, because I've also tested things like, like I used to train back in the day where at a place where they had a full court basketball court, and going and getting a 45 Olympic bar on my back and doing walking lunges there and back as one set. Well, dude, like I would get so sore after those,
Yeah.
but I also had tested, okay, just using that as my primary leg movement versus barbell squats, where I get less sore at barbell squats, but the overall growth that I get from barbell squats is, at least for me personally, not saying everybody's built the same, but is way, I'm going to get a better result out of barbell squats versus, walking weighted lunges, even though those make me way more
Yeah.
sore.
Yeah. And, if you did those walking lunges every day, maybe you wouldn't be as sore, I don't
Yeah.
know, or maybe it was just so much volume, but the soreness thing, Lee Haney always said, just stimulate, don't annihilate. And again, that wasn't just how I like to train forever. But then, I started experimenting with it, and it really isn't. You just need to do whatever you need to do to force adaptation. Now, as you become more adept and you can handle more volume, like you're kind of experiencing now, and definitely like I experienced, when I first started doing all this, yeah, I had to throw more volume at it to get adaptation, but I still wasn't sore more than 24 hours. God, I don't even know what I would have to do to go in and like be sore for a week or 10 days. I don't know if you can do it. I don't know
Yeah.
what that workout would look like, but it's not the end all be all indication of growth. It just means you're taking longer to recover, and then you can do less training cycles, in my opinion, in the year, which would be less growth.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I was listening to, and again, I know you're not a huge fan of all the exercise scientists, but, Dr. Andy Galpin, who's one of the guys that I do like to follow a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he works with like a lot of the UFC guys, and, I heard him, I think he was on Dr. Gabriel Lyons podcast, but, he was like,
Yeah.
look, of the things of importance, like if we grade out 1 to 10, he goes, soreness, I'd probably put at a 2. He's like, consistency, technique, managing fatigue, progressive overload,
Yeah.
your proximity to failure per working set. He goes, like, all of those things are so much more important than soreness.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well put. Yeah, I mean, it's a great tool, right? I really like it when you're evaluating movements, and I really like it when you're trying to learn how to effectively hit a muscle group. I really like it when you're trying to build the mind muscle connection, with air quotes. I love it. It's a great tool for that, but as an indication that you're growing and that's a metric, solely the metric to hit for hypertrophy. I don't think so.
Yep. 1,000%, dude. So then, I know we were kind of talking off air, but it sounds like there's been quite a few bodybuilders that are unfortunately kind of passed away over the past little bit of time, huh?
Yeah, I got hit on YouTube a whole bunch of them. There's a 19-year-old kid that just dropped dead. I think he was in Brazil, and the guy was showing pictures of him, the change that he made in a year at 19 years old. Right, he went from looking like a skinny ass high school kid to, like he put on like 15 pounds of muscle, and he was, shredded at the contest, which means it was a lot more than that typically. And I've always said, if you start using gear at a younger age, it never turns out well. Unfortunately, this kid must have had really bad cardiovascular genetics or whatever, and that exacerbated the problem. Or I don't know. I'm not sure what the cause of death was, but man, that's brutal. And then there was a really big dude. I can't pronounce his name. Gollum something. He's probably one of the biggest bodybuilders walking around. Not a guy who wins shows, but just a mass monster kind of looking dude. Kind of almost reminded me of Rich Piana. I think he looked like he had a bunch of silicone injected into his body. He dropped dead at 38. And then there was a guy in the UK that I guess they think went into a insulin shock while he was working out and never recovered from it, died in the hospital. So um, yeah, I don't know if they seem to be all in the last month. So we've had but I think the more people that are listening to kids and dudes on Instagram and these guys getting into cycles really young and then not really understanding the implications, I think it's just going to continue. And guys aren't. That's always going to happen. It's always been that way. It's not like it's new, But I think we're more aware of it now. Used to be, your guys would die on the private board and maybe 50 people knew, but now if the guy was on Instagram and semi-famous, then it kind of gets around.
Yeah, one the thing I always look at that is like when you see a pro bodybuilder die, everybody just makes the jump and the leap, the assumption that it's of steroids and look,
Yeah.
or the PEDs. And look, there could be a good possibility that is, but then also like, hey, people not using
Might have
PEDs
been
every
fentanyl.
single day
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
like you never know, so,
Yeah.
but I kind of understand the leap, or people always have that assumption, but then from there, and this is why, like you've always, I know we talked about this ton on the podcast, but it's like, if you're going to go down that path, just be methodical about it, being just religious about getting your blood work, figuring out what what do you call it? Like figuring out what the minimum dose to get that response is that, to get the max results that you can get away with. But like, there's a healthy way, I guess, to do PEDs, or a healthier way where you can maybe minimize some of the risk. But unfortunately, most people that I know that are on anabolics, dude, they're like I don't know if they're too afraid, but they never get their blood work done.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever changed, man. And then, to get a guy that's you can tell isn't healthy, but to get a guy to take his blood pressure and then do something about it, or, go, and I have a, kind of a very solid suggestion that if you take anything, if you take testosterone, especially if you're doing like a performance dose, if you take that, your first shots, and, your blood pressure goes up, it's not going to end well for you, man. You should not do it. Because then some of the guys will take things to handle the blood pressure, bring their blood pressure down. But that, now you're throwing more drugs into the system, and it's not a good way to start. Fortunately, I was one of those guys. I could take whatever I wanted. My blood pressure didn't change, and then genetically, I guess, I was protected cardiovascular wise. But, I was lucky that way, but I wasn't a super responder either. You guys there's guys out there that take, 10 milligrams of D-ball and they put on, 5 pounds of muscle overnight. But those are typically also the guys that have high blood pressure from that first 10 milligrams of D-ball. So there's a lot of considerations in there, and it's, man, I guess you really have to decide what you want to do and what your limits are and what your risk threshold is. But, guys aren't going through that kind of that decision tree before they decide to do it, which is a shame.
Well, I think too, like we've gotten to a point in society, just with the obesity epidemic, with the number of people, like just the exponential growth of the people that are overweight, the assumption now is anybody that's in decent shape is on a ton of drugs.
Yeah.
Like according to my Facebook,
from your picture,
right? Like I get accused of being an old trend, nobody can. I think that there's just the assumption that's where people then they immediately, and I don't know if it's that or if it's just, hey, we're in this Amazon culture where you click a button, you have instant gratification, where people aren't willing to do. Like I was talking to this young dude the other day that reached out to me, who's a young entrepreneur, but he wants to create some big success, but you just leap in from like business to business to bit, all this stuff. And, but essentially I was like, all right, dude, like you got to slow down. You got to have some patience. First of all, you got to get clarity on what the vision is so you can align this. And then I was talking about but he was like, look, dude, I don't know if I can do that. He goes, that's just going to take too long. And he's like, you got to understand, man, I'm from the instant gratification strategy, like
Yeah.
era, like I need it now. And I'm like, well, then dude, you're probably never going to create any element of business or financial success, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just that too, like this younger generation, they're just so used to, they don't know what it's like to put in, that 10, 15 years of natural work like you did to get to your natural peak before you go to that next
Yeah.
level, could just be wiring too, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, more and more people are into bodybuilding now too, which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool and it's kind of not because now the gyms are busier. But yeah, it's yeah, and stuff's even more available than it ever has been. And then you have access to all these accounts and ways to watch all these people who are doing it and are fucking teenagers too. I think it's everything. It's all of that. It's all of that. It'd be hard to just put your head down and grind and not worry about it. I think nowadays more than ever. But we had Muscle Mags though telling us that Joe Weider's chewable aminos were going to make you look like Arnold too. So
Yeah.
it's always kind of fucking been there. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, it's just like everything, man. People are fearing, people don't want to put in the hard work, and it sucks. It's not sexy. It takes a while. Very good friend of mine. I mean, this person tried to lose weight for a very long time, and fucking months, and super discouraging. And finally, went to a doctor, got some hormones adjusted, and then even that months more, and then finally shit started to work. Digestion was healed, all these things kind of kicked in, and that person fought 8 months or more of just fucking nothing, and then all of a sudden it clicked. And it's fucking glorious, when that happens. But you take a normal, just any fat dude or whatever that I've ever coached, I'm like, hey, it's going to take 5 weeks before you even fucking see anything. I mean, you might get that water drop, this first week or whatever. Don't buy into that. That's nothing. It's going to take a good 5 weeks of consistency before you really start to see something. But once you do, once you hit that momentum, then it helps, right? Then you get a little momentum and you get some encouragement, you see some results, and then you're like, okay, this makes sense. But I think that's with everything, man. You've got to put in that first amount of time with fucking nothing happening except you believing in the process. Like, yeah, if I keep doing this, something's going to happen. And, it's a lonely place to be, but I think that's the only way to get there. You have to have that belief in yourself, like that belief and that discipline and that commitment. Like, I don't care what everybody says. I'm doing this for fucking 8 weeks, or I'm doing this for 5 weeks until something happens, or I'm going to do this or I'm going to die, or just that type of conviction. Because that first starting out is you're in a ghost town all by yourself, especially dieting, man. Nobody helps you diet. Everybody's like, oh, just have this. Oh, you never eat out. Oh, you never, all that shit. So it's tough, man.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and I was telling them. I mean, they were asking me a lot of questions about my health and fitness. So I was, what I was doing, my plan, and so I was telling them about you and all the change ups that you've had me make, and they're like, well, how long do you plan on doing this for? I'm like, well, I figured I'd give it. A full shot with this exact strategy for probably the next 3 years, and then fully assess the results and see what kind of tweaks it needs. And they looked at like, they just like, I thought maybe they didn't hear me because they just paused. And I was like, yeah, all right. And they're like, you're going to stick with this for 3 years? They're like, Matt, I thought you were going to say like 3 months. I'm like, dude, 3 months isn't enough time to give anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, if I can stack on, let's just say 4 to 5 pounds of true lean muscle mass a year over the next 3 years and gain 15 pounds. I mean, that's going to be, for me, that's crazy, right? Like crazy,
Yeah.
good standpoint.
Yeah.
But I'm like, shit, dude, like at my age and at the level that I'm at with, years of training, like that's just like, if I'm not willing to give it at least that to then assess, hey, is this the right, full program, or do I make modifications? But most people are looking at days, weeks, maybe months, not necessarily in years.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, I guess kept me doing it for so long and really gave me a lot of perspective. But in bodybuilding, I'd be like, hey, I compete in November and December. Once I got into it, I was like, I'm going to do 2 contests a year, maybe 3, but it's going to be, the first one's going to be in November. So when I finished that last one in, December, then I got like 11 months to put on 5 to 6, 7 more pounds of muscle and get leaner than I did before. So what does that look like? And I would have it laid out. All right, month 1, this is how I'm going to approach it. And I knew it would fucking take a year. I knew it doesn't, and that's just to make little changes. And so that put a real perspective on it, especially when you look at your contest pictures, like, fuck, man, I did everything right, and I changed a little bit, but man, is that what 7 pounds looks like? Cause it doesn't look like a lot, but how many years am I going to have to do that to get here? And people don't understand. It takes a long time, dude.
Yeah.
It's a long, lonely road. That's for sure. But like we've talked about before, you got to build that dopamine reward system to understand that, as you're going through the process, you get rewarded every day for doing the process. It's not about, the goal, or it's not about looking at your picture from last week and going, oh, fuck yeah. Because that's not going to happen. You're going to fail if you do that.
Yeah. And you get people that'll be like, oh man, that sounds like so much work and that sounds just tough that, but then it's like, what's the alternative?
Right.
And I look at it, I can just tell anybody, like, it's a hell of a lot harder to be overweight, obese, hating your body, having no energy, feeling like shit all the time, being insecure. At least that's how I was when I was, 276 pounds and morbidly obese, all of those things. I'm like, the pain I experienced there was way worse than any of the pains that you and I have talked about in this podcast. Like the pains that, we've talked about, to me, is like fucking easy compared to the pain of the, just overall fucking almost depression that I had, at least with my feeling about myself, with my body, and, and again, not having any energy and, I mean, to me, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Yep. And, we find that when guys like, I hurt my shoulder or one of the injuries, it's like, yeah, it took me 3, 4, 5 months to rehab it, but now I'm rehab. Well, God, that sounds stupid. Why didn't you just go get surgery or do this or whatever? And like, well, that wouldn't have fixed it. So what do? I guess my shoulder's hurt now forever. And people just live with it. It's crazy, but yeah, there's so many examples of that in life, I think.
Yep. Yep. Pick your pain, man.
Yeah.
So, man. Well, I think that's probably a good point to end it. As always, dude, truly appreciate you, Jim, for joining us, man. It's been awesome catching up with you, brother.
Yeah, man. Great talk. Great talk.
100%. Those watching, listening, as always, we truly appreciate you guys. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, if there's any specific topics, questions, topics, things that you'd like Jim and I to cover, or that I should say you'd like me to ask Jim about here on the podcast that Jim can cover, just make sure to drop those lines, man. We want to make sure that we're bringing you guys information, content that's valuable and helpful to you. Truly appreciate you guys. Keep crushing, keep kicking ass. We'll see you next time. Peace.